Victime Pascania laudes, Simone Christiani, Agnus redemit oves, Christus innocens patri, reconciliavit peccatores. Mose pita duello, culpins fere mirando, Dux vitae mortuus regnat vivus. Sic nobis Maria, qui vidisti in vivo, sepulcrum Christi viventis, et gloriam vidi resurgentis, angelicos vestes, sudarium et vestes, Surrexit Christus pes mea, precedit sumus in Galileam. Scimus Christum surrexiste, a mortuis vere, tu nobis victorex miserere. Alleluia, Dies confetit Dominus, exultemus, The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
Disciples told what had happened on the road and how Jesus was known to them in the breaking of the bread. As they were saying this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace to you." But they were startled and frightened and supposed that they saw a spirit. And he said to them, "Why are you troubled, and why do questionings rise in your hearts? See my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me and see, for a spirit has not flesh and bones as you see that I have." And when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while they still disbelieved for joy and wondered, he said to them, "Have you anything here to eat?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate before them. Then he said to them, "These are my words which I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled." Then he opened their minds to understand the Scriptures and said to them, "Thus it is written, that the Christ should suffer and on the third day rise from the dead, and that repentance and forgiveness of sins should be preached in his name to all nations, beginning from Jerusalem. You are witnesses of these things." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
The first verse of the Gospel of this day is to be found in the end of the Gospel of yesterday. So there is a continuous reading here, broke into two. And indeed, this is the fullness of the manifestation. Hitherto we have had to do in Luke with reports of things. Here we have the Lord himself coming and leaving them perplexed. And because of this perplexity, he stoops to their human level and deigns in his humanity, now glorified, to share humanity's need of food, asking them if there's anything prepared. And we have also the commissioning, embryonic here, but nevertheless essential, all in an atmosphere of shalom, his first words, shalom alechem. And this is a theme of all our liturgical celebrations and will be until the end of time. If there is no peace in our moments of encounter between brethren and encounter between brethren and their Lord, then it is dysfunctional, and we are not in a mode pleasing to the one that we're trying to honor. All done in the house of God must be in this ambit, pax vobis. If one climbs the Holy Mount of Monte Cassino, one is very quickly struck by a massive bit of writing writ large on the wall of the abbey. It's simply 3 letters, pax, and it sums it all up. The Domus Dei, house of God, that is the whole monastery, in that case, is a place where reigns the King of Peace. And one does feel, in entering a good monastery, something of that in all the areas of the inner sanctum where Christ and the brethren have carved apart a place for peace. Hence we exclude noise and what creates it, humanly and artificially. And in the heart there must also reign peace, for if that is not there, all the rest is but a contrivance, and will soon be seen for what it is. But then we have the commissioning. We have here something which does cause exegetes to pause a little. The fact that it could be punctuated differently, remembering that the original ancient manuscripts didn't have our punctification as we have it now. And so we could break it up like this, beginning from Jerusalem, you are my witnesses. But actually, the greater number of translations does what we have here in the RSV. Repentance and forgiveness of sins, notice there has to be repentance, should be preached in his name. So preaching is going to be the vehicle to all nations, beginning from Jerusalem. Break. You are witnesses of these things. And to be a witness in the early church means to be a martus, which can involve bloodshed, and very often will. I'll return to that in a second. We have here also words which we find again at the beginning of the second work issued from the hands of St. Luke, the Acts of the Apostles. At the beginning of that volume we have again the words of the Lord before the Ascension. And we have this verse expanded there in this way. In Jerusalem, in Judea, Samaria, and to the uttermost bounds of the world. And the outworking of that will be seen in the whole of the Acts of the Apostles, and it draws to an end when it reaches what is going to be the beginning of the uttermost bounds of the world, Rome, the centre of diffusion for the whole Western world, including where we are here, eventually. And the link between this and what we had yesterday in the walk to Emmaus can be seen in the insistence that we have in this moment the fulfillment of all, notably what has been there, pairing it by the divine pedagogy in Scripture. Yesterday we had that reference to what Moses talked about and the prophets, the category of the law and the prophets, therefore, and then it expanded here. Then he opened their minds to understand the Scriptures and said to them, it's written, so the written bit, Kasuv, it's written, is found in the three categories that are given here in their fullness. Everything written about me in the law of Moses, the Torah, and the prophets, Nevi'im, and the Psalms. Now here, the Tefillim, it's also the writings coming in, that category of important Hebrew works, Ketubim, the things actually written, and these are going to be in common with the Christian world, and especially actually the Psalms, for they will be the hymn book of the Jews that the Christians are going to use as well, and which we still do today. Hence it is that when we celebrate the divine office, we are doing something very ancient, in which the Lord, of course, recognizes himself. We are his voice, the church is his voice, and the Lord recognizes himself in the Psalms. He would have done so when he chanted them. For instance, in the Last Supper, it says when they had sung a hymn, that would have been the Hallel. Then they went out. So they were singing the Psalms, especially used on that holy night, remembering the Exodus and the redemption of Israel, which is happening to the full in the Easter Triduum. And I'm sure it would have been a very beautiful chant, that little band of apostles together with the Saviour himself. Probably would have gone into harmony. And by the way, at this time in our Abbey, for this Easter week, we had at Vespers the solemn procession of baptism, and we would sing a tone which is in common with the Hebrews, because the Christians received the tonus penegrinus from the earlier praise of the Jews. And so on. Therefore we can say to ourselves, we are singing what the Lord sang. And we're going to have in this period immediately following the eventual conflict with the powers that Christianity is coming to upset. Very quickly things start going wrong humanly. And it is not long before the first martyr, Stephen, is stoned with the very same leitmotif as we're going to find in Christian martyrs, forgiveness, as Jesus gave the example on the cross. Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. On this day we remember not the first of martyrs, but the last pope who is still canonized as a martyr, even though actually he's a borderline case. He's hardly ever celebrated because it falls at this crucial time of the year, but it is his day, Martin I. He's worth looking after and looking towards for the example that he gave. He's as late as 655, so long after the cessation of persecution with the Edict of Milan in 313. But what happens? With Christianity expanding, it becomes popular, it becomes societal. And whereas in Rome, by this time already the Roman Empire of the West has fallen, and that has left the church more free. In the East, there is still a slight involvement, which becomes increasingly dominant at times, of the state, because in Constantinople, of course built by Constantine, there is a Christian emperor who presumes he has rights over church life, and strong bishops have to stand up to him, because he's not graced in the same way with regard to theological knowledge, and he can be a thorough nuisance, as we will see. And this is what happened in the case of Pope Martin. He knew the East, for he had served Constantinople, and he was eventually elected Bishop of Rome, Pope. That was in 649. And shortly afterwards, he called a council at the Lateran in order to condemn the heretics who denied that Christ had a human will. This is a very Eastern problem. They have a great devotion to the divinity of Christ, but it left that divinity, as it were, in mid-air at times, and it led to a Monophysite heresy, monophysis, one nature, which forgot the importance also of the humanity. He had two natures, and he also had the human will. To deny that is monothelitism, because the thelema of the Lord also was human. And he had this obvious tension between the two, resolved perfectly because he was perfectly God and man, but nevertheless it comes out in the garden. So we're having to react against these in this early period of church life, tendencies to forget certain elements. So he's condemning in this council the heretics who denied that Christ had a human will, and the same council condemned a document promulgated precisely by the Emperor Constans II. Interesting that they can presume to have these documents promulgated, interfering very much in church life. And that, of course, is going to see an effect in church life in the East to this day, notably with regard to the discipline, with regard to holy matrimony, because they sometimes had to placate emperors who had marital problems. Infuriated by this, the emperor in question sent emissaries to kidnap the Pope and take him back to Constantinople. On arrival, Martin was thrown into prison, and though seriously ill, was later exiled to the Crimea. The emperor had actually condemned Pope Martin I to death, but his life was spared through the intervention of Paul, Patriarch of Constantinople. We know that at the time there were 5 patriarchates: Jerusalem, the first in time; Antioch, the second in time, where Peter had been; Rome; Alexandria, where Mark had been sent by Peter; and Constantinople eventually, which is going to be regarded as the new Rome by the East as time goes on. Since he had been condemned to death and spent the last few years of his life in such misery and want, he is venerated as a martyr. He is in fact the last pope to be honoured as a martyr. Interesting that we have that theme coming in again in the third secret of Fatima. Had John Paul II not been persecuted by Our Lady, for instance, he would well have been by now feasted as a martyr. But we don't know quite what the full meaning of the third secret is. It's not yet perhaps completely unfolded. We have writings from his still extant. He's writing to a friend while at Constantinople, or rather to a friend in Constantinople when he is by now Pope. And he groans under the weight of his affliction to the point of saying, "Behold, we are deprived of our very life." But God wishes all men to be saved and to come to a knowledge of the truth through the prayers of Peter. Now that's an important statement, because as with Gregory the Great, who died in 604, and Leo the Great, who was living in the 400s, there is a full awareness that the See of Rome has a role of authority outside Rome and over other patriarchs. This is seen until eventually there is a split, for very unfortunate reasons, in 1054, when they have to readjust their ecclesiology as a result of the split and losing the Patriarch of the West. Hence, he says, "I pray that God will strengthen their hearts in the Orthodox faith." Now here there's still the juxtaposition of Catholic and Orthodox, which is there in the Roman canon, in the Latin, to this day. It hasn't yet become divided between Catholic in the West and Orthodox in the East. Help them to stand firm against every heretic and enemy of the Church, and guard them unshaken. He goes on to make his friend aware of the terrible plight he has, but he does say this, which is interesting. "Even if they cut me into pieces, I can never accept union with the Church of Constantinople." So here we have a doctrinal problem coming to a head, leading to disunion between major sees, and the legitimate Pope insisting on the rights and the authority that he has. And indeed it is seen that the Orthodox faith is maintained in Rome precisely because of its liberty. With regard to the way in which the East then had to go its own way eventually, we can see how it was political elements which tried to get them to save their skin in the mid-1400s, when the Islamic bloc was becoming ever stronger in the area of present-day Turkey. And therefore, Constantinople, Byzantium, in the years leading up to the calamity, were trying to make overtures to the West so as to have eventual military support to defend it against the Islamic attacks, which led to the Ecumenical Council, recognized as such by the East, at least on paper, of Ferrara and Florence. It goes on, it starts, Ferrara goes to Florence. It concluded in 439 with an agreement, and that's on paper, that they are actually accepting certain things, and they are at that point reconciled in paper. But unfortunately, what happens is that when they go back to the East, their own people protest and say, "We would rather be under the Saracens than under Rome." And that is what happened in 1453. Constantinople fell, and we know the consequences. Alas, that could have been avoided had the East not gone its own way. The devil knows what he's doing, and if it can happen on such a large scale in church life, it can happen on every level in church life. Prayer groups, local parishes, even families. Divide and conquer. Proclaim his triumph in the earth, for Christ is risen as he said, the crucified, the living God, who dwelt 3 days among the dead. Christ died for in bitter shame, but now he lives in power and might. His fire unquenched, his vital flame fills all the world with joy and light. The uncreated Father praised, His living and unconquered Son, who with the Spirit reigns supreme, triumphant Trinity.